Hey there, it's Sam with another quick video for you, and today I have a confession to make. I am in fact a bad English major, and I will tell you why in just a couple minutes. But first, I want to say a good writer must always be also a. That's why I've been doing some of these videos. I'm doing book reviews every once in a while, and the book I'm reading now will tell you why I'm a bad English major. But yeah, um, trying to read different books, read a variety, and get a sense of what kinds of things what kinds of things we can apply to writing from our own from the things we're reading. Sorry for the stumbling over words and such. I'm a writer, not a speaker, obviously. Um, but so my question for you is, what are you reading these days? And part two, what can you apply from it to your own writing? Okay, if you're also a writer like me, what are you reading? What can you apply from it to your own writing? I will tell you my answer right now. So I am. Let's see. I was an English major. Um, I graduated 6 years ago with a master's in English, so a two-time English major, really. I'm 31 years old, and it's not until this month, August of 2021, that I've ever read anything in my life by Jane Austen. Okay, but I'm now reading Sense and Sensibility. Okay, so that's why I said I'm a bad English major, because this is one of my major blind spots in the realm of literature. I'm sure I have more than just this one, but this is at least one big one. I hadn't read any Jane Austen until just now. There's a couple reasons for that. Not like I was specifically avoiding Jane Austen, just like in my undergrad, I kind of focused on older British literature like Shakespeare, Chaucer, even took a class in Arthurian legends. In my grad school days, for various reasons, I gravitated toward American. Just kind of the availability of classes and the authors I was interested in. Just kind of that was where my focus ended up being. So I guess you could say British lit post Shakespeare is one of my weak areas. Not that I've read nothing there, but I haven't studied it or focused on it too much. Um, and I'm sure when I was younger in college, my early 20s, I'm sure I liked the Arthurian stories and the Shakespearean stories more than what seemed like just a novel about pre-Victorian romance. I realize now there's more to these books than just the romance plot on the surface, but maybe I didn't fully grasp that picture when I was a little younger. I have read Jane Eyre. Again, I know they're not the same. They're not the same. They're from similar eras. Jane Eyre is a little bit later. They're sometimes compared and contrasted. I wanted to say Victorian for this. I looked it up and realized I guess Queen Victoria actually didn't reign until a little bit later. This book was published in 1811, so it's 210 years old, a little before the Victorian era, but still a, I guess, strict society, a society that, by today's standards at least, seems formal and rigid and things like that, and she's criticizing and satirizing that. So, so I'm now reading my first ever Jane Austen book. I'm about halfway through Sense and Sensibility. I feel like Pride and Prejudice is her most famous one, or most talked about one. Still have never read it in my life, the regular version or the zombie version. Still hope to at some point. I'm liking this one decently. So I don't know if I'll ever read all six or so of her novels, but I'll try to read at least these two major ones in my life. But yeah, so I'm halfway through. And the other thing to mention is I'm reading not just the regular version, but this is a new edition that came out with the Guide to Reading and Reflecting by Dr. Karen Swallow Prior. If you don't know Dr. Prior, she's becoming a big name in literary and academic circles these days. I was actually blessed to be able to study under her in my undergrad and graduate years. And I did an interview with her and her author work, earlier in one of these live videos, or if you're listening to the podcast later, you can find that episode on the podcast. But yeah, so I'm reading a new edition with commentary from one of my old professors. That's pretty cool. So I'm about halfway through this book right now, and I'm liking it so far. It's obviously a departure from the kinds of things I usually read. For commercial fiction, for light escapist reading, I usually go to a Star Wars book or something. This is obviously very different from that. I'm liking it overall. I wouldn't say I'm like glued to the pages or anything like that. I mean, there are times when I'm reading it at night and have to go to bed or fall asleep. I mean, that happens with any book these days. Now that I'm older and have a 1-year-old, but I'm enjoying it enough to keep going. My goal is to finish. It's my goal anytime I read a book, unless it's really boring or something, which I would not say this is. So you know, if at one point in my life, if when I was younger, I had envisioned these books being like stuffy, boring romances, I am finding them to be more than that now. So that's good. I'll tell you just in a moment about some things I like about it, and I wouldn't say dislike exactly, but it's things that I feel like are not what I'm used to these days, or things that might not sell well in today's market. Um, so if you're not familiar with the premise at all, the title Sense and Sensibility refers to two different sisters, the main characters in the novel, Eleanor and Mary Ann. They're both characterized by different, I guess, different personality types, sense and sensibility. Now, in our culture today, those two words are almost synonyms. Being sensible means just, oh, you use sense, right? But the commentary has explained, and others have explained, sensibility back then meant more so like feeling, more like emotion. Some word usage has evolved over time, but it's just more of a contrast between sense or reason or logic or rationality and sensibility, which is emotion and feeling. And so that's kind of the major contrast of the two characters. And I'm sure there's others too, and there's other themes, but that's a big theme of the novel. And I find that interesting. I mean, I've talked before about how either just in my own personal life or in some of my own writing, I've tried to contrast those two. I have one character in my own in my superhero story who basically through the magic of science fiction becomes able to turn off his own emotions and becomes just a villain or just someone fueled by logic, and he has good intentions at first, but of course kind of the morality there is he goes down a dark path. His absence of compassion makes him turn into a villain or an amoral creature, basically, and basically I'm saying don't go that way. So and just in my own introspectiveness and my own I guess struggles as an angsty teenager, then an angsty college student, and things like that. I've been fascinated by the dichotomy between reason and emotion and how they must and should work together. So the two main characters are largely largely fall into those categories, but I mean, no real person is 100% one way or the other. No real person is all rational or all emotional. Obviously, all of us have some characteristics of both, or can act different ways at different times. And I think that's true of these characters too, of Eleanor and Mary Ann. They're realistic characters. So yes, maybe one leans more toward logic, one leans more toward emotion, but it's not like they're 100% that way. I'm kind of identifying with Eleanor because I guess I tend to be in my own life a little more on the logical, rational side. I'm kind of identifying with her, and she's trying to be prim and proper and trying to not let things get to her in an emotional way. I get that, and it's reasonable, but I'm at a point where she recently had an emotional disappointment, found out some news about a man she was interested in, and wasn't news she was happy to hear, and she didn't like openly go off or explode or cry or anything, but you can tell by the narration and just by how she's reacting that she's not happy about it and she's trying to keep it in. My mom has read this before. My parents were visiting this past week, and she didn't tell me major spoilers, but she told me like toward the end of the novel something happens. I don't know what yet because I haven't read it yet. Something happens, and Eleanor, the logical one, kind of explodes and is no longer able to hold it all in. So if that's what happens, then I think that is a good, I'd say a good portrayal or a good way to show these characters as realistic. Like, yes, she's usually emotional, or she's usually calm and rational, but pushed to her brink, she can explode too. I think it's good to show the multifacetedness there of both characters. So that's been helpful. The author, the commentary here by Dr. Pryor did make a point that, like, again, no complete person is completely emotional, completely rational. So kind of melding the two sides together means you have a complete person. And so just the way Austen shows those contrasts and shows two different complete people has been interesting to me so far. And so that's one of the main things I've liked about it. I think I also when I was reading this, it reminded me of a story that my wife is writing. We have a writers group we both are active in, and so my wife has been writing a story, and there's a lot of characters in it, but kind of the central characters are two sisters. One is a little more emotional, one is a little more rational, generally speaking. And from her own admission, I know that these are at least partially based on my wife and her own sister growing up. My wife is the more emotional one, but when I was reading this book, I told her, this reminds me of your characters, and she was like, I was also influenced by Sense and Sensibility. I was like, oh, good. So I'm just glad I was able to see those connections there, and that came through at my wife's wedding, and that she's dealing with these topics and themes too. And so, and me now being married to her, I can also see this dichotomy. I mean, this is not 100%. This is in general. I tend to be a little more calm and rational, or I try to be at least. And my wife, I wouldn't say she's overly emotional, but just in contrast to me, she's generally the emotional or spontaneous or feeling one. And now just having to navigate that contrast among other contrasts in my own personal relationships, including my marriage. That's an important part of life, important things to work through. And just seeing these characters written out, or those two types written out in fiction, has been interesting to me so far and enjoyable to watch. So I guess I could say the character portrayal is realistic, and the characters themselves are, likable and interesting and realistic enough to keep me interested, but they're also dealing with some important themes of humanity. I mean, that's not the only thing I like about it. I mean, there's been some. I don't always identify with the teenage girls in a novel. I mean, they're 19 and 16, but there's been some respectable male characters in there who I'm kind of rooting for. I'm not sure where their stories are going to go yet. But again, I may have heard minor spoilers from people talking about it before, and I mean that's okay because it's 200 years old. But overall, I'm not sure what's going to happen with each of the characters who ends up with who. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing where that goes and seeing hopefully a happy and peaceful resolution for for the two girls at least, and some of those male characters also. Should be interesting to see. Okay, I'll make some minor. I don't even know if criticism is the right word, because it's just these are things that are not my style, and I feel like they're not the style of today. Now that's largely because I'm coming from a different culture than this is written in. So I mean, I will say like the dialogue seems very formal, and again, it is a different culture than I grew up in, or than anyone alive today grew up in. So it's not there are parts that are dialogue heavy, and like people have these long conversations about their feelings, and like Eleanor will say something like, I'm just summarizing, giving an example off the top of my head, but like oh, at first I thought you meant this, but I was very glad to notice that you actually meant this, and I didn't want to create the false impression of whatever. Just these long expositions about their own feelings and about their own communications, which in one sense I feel that's not realistic, because I'm not sure if they did that more so actually in Britain 200 years ago, or if that was still the author kind of playing things up. Yeah, even then, I'm not sure if they had such formal drawn out conversations about their feelings. Maybe they did. I know that culture mostly just from reading about it, so I could be wrong. On one sense, me being a quote unquote rational person who doesn't always get emotions at first, I feel like that's helpful sometimes. I'm like, it'll be very helpful in real life if people actually have these long, patient conversations about what they're actually feeling, and could just talk face to face like that without and go into the nuances without people getting offended or anything like that. Doesn't always happen that way in real life. So I feel like it's not realistic, at least not to my culture, maybe not to real life even 200 years ago, I'm not sure. But it's interesting to me to see people talking like this, and in some ways I feel like it's helpful. But I also feel like this kind of dialogue heaviness wouldn't really fly today. I'm not going to comment on whether it's objectively good or bad writing. That's I think it's beyond the scope of this video. But I will say in today's market, where they're trying to keep things short and trying to keep readers' attention spans, which is frustrating to me too, because I'm an overwriter and I'm having to edit my own novel back down. But in today's market, I feel like something like this wouldn't sell well. Like I said, that's why it's a classic from years ago. And I'm sure there's a place for like a modern day Sense and Sensibility, or like some author, if they haven't already, could write like modern day versions of these teenage girls, and a novel that would explore the same things in today's setting. I'm sure that's probably something like that has been done, but if it hasn't, I'm sure there's a market for it. It would just be a different kind of kind of writing style for our culture that would have to work. Yeah, but I think yeah. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. The the formal stilted style of dialogue, again, it's taking me some getting used to. But I kind of expected. Again, I went into this knowing it wasn't going to be the same escapist light reading I usually do. It was going to be at least a little heavier on the reading effort side. That's okay. It's just making me do more brain exercises to follow it sometimes. I meant to say something about her satire too. I forgot to say that earlier. Austen uses satire to satirize. Again, before this, I would have said Victorian, but I did some research. It's actually pre-Victorian, but to satirize or criticize lightly the culture she's in and some of its values. And this book is funny. It's funnier than I maybe first realized. I wouldn't say it's laugh out loud funny. Like it's not primarily meant as a comedy in the modern sense. It's not like I'm laughing every page, but there have been lines in there, descriptions of people, or just the writer using something, and I'm like, oh, I get it. Like chuckling things. It reminds me a little bit of Oscar Wilde. I know he was a little later than this also, but he's also kind of satirizing and poking fun at a similar culture to this one. I've read a little bit of it. I know I said British post Shakespeare wasn't my forte. I've read like 2 things by Oscar Wilde at least, but so it reminds me a little bit of that kind of style and tone of just witticisms that, I mean, not in a mean or mocking way. I mean, satire, if you're familiar, does it hopefully in a lighthearted way, but just of these kind of witticisms that poke fun at different values, different kind of cultures and models within this time set, this time period. So that's been helpful. That's been fun to read. I was going to say something else, and I completely forgot what it was. So whether that was lost to eternity. But I don't want to keep rambling for 3 minutes. I'll wrap this up then if I can't think of what I was going to say. Short summary, short conclusion is I'm reading Sense and Sensibility. I'm liking it so far. And again, I wouldn't say I'm like enthralled on every page, but liking it more than maybe I thought I would 10 years ago in college. So better late than never. Oh, sorry, the thing I was going to mention from a minute ago. Side note, but that's what you get when you just do kind of off the top of your head one thing that Dr. Parr mentioned in the commentary regarding the jokes was no one gets all the jokes, she said. I mean, in today's culture, at least, if you're not familiar with all their cultural values and such for that day, no one gets all the jokes, but she said it's better to get like 10% of a good book than 100% of a bad one. And I'm like, that's a good point. So I'm sure there are things I'm missing. I'm sure there's things I'm not getting, but I'm getting enough of it that I'm enjoying it. And yeah, good book. I mean, I didn't doubt it was a good book. It's a classic that's lasted 200 plus years now. But I'm just not getting into it. But I like it so far. Again, I like it more than I might have thought I would 10 years ago in college as a young man who maybe is not super interested in pre-Victoria romances. But again, there's more to the book than that. So definitely recommend this one and Dr. Parr's whole series of reading and reflecting commentaries. I think he has 4 out now of some classics, and it's coming out with more. So the things that apply to my own writing are the character development aspects I already talked about, and the themes of dealing with emotion versus reason and kind of the conflict and mixture there. So yeah, keep reading, and I'm going to cut this short. If you want more content from me, more book reviews, author discussions, author interviews, group discussions, things like that, check the Chippermaker link in the video description and sign up for my mailing list there. Until then, I will see you next week. Thanks for listening. Happy reading, happy writing. Have a great weekend. Bye.